Miss those school lunches from the 1960s we'll never taste again? Back then, hearty trays and cold milk made every school day feel like a small celebration. What happened to that simple joy? And why does thinking about it still make us smile? Sloppy Joe on buttered bun was the undisputed king of the 1960s cafeteria, a messy mix of sweet tomato sauce and crumbled ground beef piled high on a soft white bun that never stood a chance. The sauce soaked into the bread until it reached that perfect level of soggy where every bite dripped down your fingers and the cafeteria napkins were never strong enough to help. The smell of simmering beef and tangy ketchup-filled hallways before the lunch bell even rang, making the line for this sandwich stretch past the milk cooler. Children loved it because it was warm, filling, and just a little rebellious, a meal that made a delightful mess when you were supposed to be neat. Teachers braced themselves for stained shirts and sticky desks, but rarely complained because everyone wanted one too. It was a dish that tasted like pure fun, and its rich sauce still lingers in memory long after the last cafeteria tray was cleared. Fishstick Fridays were a weekly ritual, a nod to the no meat on Friday tradition that gave school kitchens a chance to break out the frozen boxes. Golden fish sticks lined up neatly on metal trays, their breadcrumb crusts crisp from the industrial ovens, while the insides steamed softly. Tartar sauce cups were passed along the counter, and a squeeze of lemon was a rare treat when the budget allowed. The smell of baked fish mingled with the scent of fresh rolls and cartons of milk, a combination that only children of that era can truly appreciate. Some kids swapped their sticks for extra dessert, while others built towers of fish and bread on their plates, daring friends to take a bite. It was a meal that taught patience, because those fish sticks stayed hot long after you sat down. The memory of that crunchy first bite remains sharp, a taste of childhood Fridays when the weekend was just a bell away. Creamed turkey over mashed potatoes brought a taste of holiday leftovers into an ordinary school day. Chunks of tender turkey simmered in a silky white sauce until every piece was coated in rich gravy. Scooped generously over a mound of buttery mashed potatoes, it was the kind of lunch that filled stomachs and soothed spirits in the middle of math class. The aroma of roasting poultry and warm milk gravy floated down the halls, calling every student like a quiet invitation. Even those who claimed they were not hungry somehow found room for seconds when the lunch lady offered. The sauce pooled at the edges of the tray, perfect for sopping up with the soft dinner roll that always came alongside. It felt like a small feast, a comforting reminder of family dinners even on a gray school afternoon. Many still remember that first spoonful melting across potatoes, a warm hug on a chilly day that no modern cafeteria menu can match. Spanish rice bake turned simple pantry staples into something unexpectedly satisfying. Rice was simmered with diced tomatoes, mild chili powder, ground beef, and chopped bell peppers before being baked in massive steel pans until the flavors melded together. When the trays were pulled from the oven, the smell of spiced tomatoes and peppers filled the cafeteria, carrying a hint of excitement down the lunch line. A light sprinkle of grated cheese browned on top added just enough richness to make every bite rewarding. Students liked how the rice stayed fluffy, yet soaked up the seasoned tomato sauce, each forkful offering a gentle warmth rather than strong heat. It was hearty enough to keep bellies full through afternoon classes, yet mild enough to please even the pickiest eaters. Spanish rice bake may not have been flashy, but it was dependable and deeply comforting. A dish that turned a cold day into something memorable with nothing more than rice, tomatoes, and a little school lunch magic. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches delivered pure, sticky joy that somehow satisfied federal nutrition guidelines while still feeling like a treat. Thick slices of white bread were spread edge to edge with creamy peanut butter, then drizzled with golden honey that soaked slowly into the crumb. When pressed together, the sandwich oozed sweetness with every bite, leaving fingers gleaming and napkins useless. Paired with a small carton of milk and a crisp apple, it offered both protein and energy for the playground ahead. Children loved the chewy contrast of salty peanut butter and smooth honey, a flavor combination that made even dull afternoons feel a little brighter. Lunchroom chatter often paused for the satisfying pull of honey between bites, a small moment of collective delight. Simple, inexpensive, and universally adored, this sandwich remains a memory of childhood that no packaged snack has ever replaced. Vegetable Jell-O salad was the cafeteria's attempt to make vegetables exciting, a shimmering lime green mold studded with shredded carrots or bits of cabbage that wobbled on every tray. At first glance, it looked like dessert, catching the light in a jewel-toned sparkle that promised sweetness. One bite revealed the curious mix of tangy gelatin and crisp vegetables, a flavor both strange and oddly refreshing. Teachers encouraged second helpings, claiming it was healthy, while students debated whether it belonged with the main course or beside the pudding. Some children loved the crunch of carrot against the sweet lime, while others quietly pushed it aside, mesmerized by its wobble. The memory of that cool, jiggling slice is unforgettable, a relic of a time when creativity ruled the cafeteria and no combination seemed too bold to try. Vegetable Jell-O salad remains one of the most distinctive and talked about curiosities of 1960s school lunches. Macaroni and tomato casserole was a true budget hero, filling plates and hearts with nothing more than pasta, stewed tomatoes, and a dusting of cheese. Elbow macaroni boiled in giant pots before being folded into a thick tomato sauce seasoned with onions and a touch of pepper. A light sprinkle of grated cheddar melted into a gentle crust during baking, sealing in the comforting aroma. When the lunch bell rang, the scent of tomatoes and cheese floated through hallways, drawing students with its home-style promise. Each bite brought the tender chew of macaroni and the sweet tang of slow-cooked tomatoes, a combination that felt both hearty and familiar. Children returned for seconds, not because it was fancy, but because it was filling and warm on cold days. Macaroni and tomato casserole turned simple ingredients into a meal that carried students through the longest afternoons and remains a beloved memory of uncomplicated cafeteria fare. Hot dog and bean casserole proved that a few humble ingredients could feed an entire school with room to spare. Thick baked beans simmered in a sweet brown sauce while sliced hot dogs nestled on top, their edges curling as they browned. The aroma of smoky beans and sizzling franks filled every corner of the cafeteria, making even the quietest students perk up. Served with a slice of buttered bread, it was hearty enough to power through gym class and math lessons alike. Children loved the playful surprise of finding extra pieces of hot dog hidden beneath the beans, a small reward for digging deep. The combination of sweet sauce and salty meat created a flavor that still lingers in memory, a reminder of simple pleasures on a school day. It was thrifty, filling, and impossible to forget, the kind of meal that kept students happy and cafeteria workers proud of stretching every dollar to its fullest. Turkey tetrazzini squares offered a clever twist on a post-holiday classic, transforming leftover turkey and noodles into neat, sliceable portions. Creamy mushroom sauce coated strands of spaghetti and chunks of turkey, all baked until the top formed a delicate golden crust. Once cooled slightly, the pan was cut into perfect squares that held together just long enough to reach a tray. The rich aroma of garlic and cheese drifted through the lunchroom, giving every student hope that today's meal would taste like something from home. Children loved the way each bite combined tender turkey, creamy sauce, and chewy pasta in one satisfying mouthful. It was a dish that made leftovers feel like a celebration, proving that creativity and thrift could produce something special. Turkey tetrazzini squares are a delicious memory of a time when nothing was wasted, and every holiday bird found a second life in the school cafeteria. Creamed peas on toast turned a simple vegetable into a meal that felt both nourishing and gentle, perfect for a meatless Monday. Bright green peas were simmered in a creamy white sauce until they softened and released their natural sweetness. The mixture was spooned generously over thick slices of toasted bread that soaked up the sauce while staying pleasantly chewy. The contrast of soft peas and crisp toast made each bite satisfying, while the mild flavors comforted even the pickiest eaters. Teachers praised its balance of vegetables and grains, and students discovered that a sprinkle of black pepper elevated it further. The smell of warm cream and sweet peas filled the cafeteria, creating a sense of calm before the chaos of afternoon lessons. It was humble, yes, but it carried the quiet charm of a meal prepared with care. Creamed peas on toast remains a gentle memory of 1960s school lunches, a taste of simple goodness that modern menus rarely match. Goulash Midwest style filled giant steel pans with elbow macaroni, ground beef, and a slow-simmered tomato sauce that could stretch to feed an entire cafeteria. The noodles soaked up the savory juices until every bite delivered both comfort and fullness, making it a reliable favorite when budgets were tight. Lunch ladies stirred vats of the bubbling mixture with long wooden paddles, and the smell of tomatoes and browned beef drifted down school hallways, luring students long before the bell rang. A sprinkle of dried oregano or a dash of black pepper was the only seasoning needed to make it feel like a special treat. Children returned for second helpings, knowing the warmth of that simple dish would carry them through the afternoon's lessons. It was hearty, inexpensive, and endlessly adaptable, a dish that symbolized how school kitchens turned plain staples into memorable meals. Goulash Midwest style remains a shining example of how resourceful cooking and a little spice transformed ordinary ingredients into a lunch many still crave today. Baked corn pudding brought a gentle sweetness to the lunch line, a golden casserole where fresh or canned corn mingled with eggs, milk, and a touch of sugar. When the pans emerged from the oven, the top was lightly browned while the inside stayed soft and custardy, a perfect balance of savory and sweet. Children loved the way the kernels popped against the creamy base, offering a satisfying texture with every bite. The smell of warm corn and butter greeted students as they shuffled their trays forward, promising comfort before the first spoonful. Teachers praised it as a vegetable dish, while kids simply enjoyed it as an unexpected treat that felt almost like dessert. It paired well with roasted meats or stood alone as a hearty side that filled empty stomachs without fuss. Baked corn pudding captured the spirit of the 1960s cafeteria. Simple, nourishing, and quietly indulgent, a dish that made an ordinary school day taste like a Sunday dinner. Cabbage and noodles offered a humble yet satisfying lunch inspired by the Eastern European traditions many Midwestern families brought to the United States. Thin egg noodles were tossed with butter and braised cabbage until everything glistened with savory richness. A dash of black pepper and a sprinkle of salt were all it needed to shine, though some schools added onions for extra flavor. The aroma of slow-cooked cabbage filled the air, signaling a meal that was both thrifty and hearty. Students enjoyed the tender noodles and the slight sweetness of the softened cabbage, a combination that surprised even those who claimed to dislike vegetables. It was a warming dish perfect for chilly afternoons, proving that simple ingredients could create deep comfort. Lunch ladies served generous scoops that stuck to the ribs and fueled long hours of classwork and play. Cabbage and noodles may sound plain today, but in those lunchrooms, it was beloved, a quiet reminder of home-cooked heritage and shared traditions. Stuffed green peppers turned ordinary bell peppers into little edible packages of flavor and nourishment. Each hollowed pepper was filled with seasoned rice, ground beef, and tomato sauce before being baked until tender and juicy. As they roasted, the peppers softened while the filling absorbed every bit of the tangy tomato flavor, releasing an aroma that tempted even picky eaters. Lunchroom workers lined the peppers in neat rows on wide baking sheets, creating a colorful sight that brightened the cafeteria. Children discovered the joy of cutting into the pepper and watching the savory filling spill onto their trays. It was a dish that required patience to prepare, yet its popularity made the effort worthwhile for kitchen staff who took pride in every batch. Stuffed green peppers brought a taste of home-style cooking to the school day, proof that even in a bustling cafeteria, care and tradition could shine through. Many remember it as a meal that felt like dinner served at noon. Oven-fried chicken drumsticks let schools offer crispy chicken without the mess of deep frying, using a clever shake-and-bake method that kept the meat juicy. Seasoned flour or breadcrumbs clung to each drumstick, creating a crunchy coating as the chicken roasted in large convection ovens. The scent of sizzling poultry and toasted breading filled the halls, making stomachs growl long before lunch began. Children loved the satisfying crackle of the crust followed by tender, flavorful meat beneath. Served with mashed potatoes or buttered rolls, it felt like a Sunday family meal in the middle of the week. Kitchen workers appreciated how the oven method allowed them to prepare hundreds of pieces at once without hot oil, keeping things safer and simpler. Oven-fried chicken drumsticks captured the balance of efficiency and comfort, proving that school lunches could deliver real flavor even on a tight schedule. For many, that golden drumstick remains an unforgettable taste of 1960s cafeteria dining. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze stood tall as the definition of classic comfort, sliced into neat rectangles that fit perfectly on the plastic tray compartments. Ground beef was mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and onions, then baked until the edges browned. Just before serving, a layer of ketchup was spread on top and caramelized to a sweet, tangy finish that gleamed under the cafeteria lights. The aroma of roasted beef and warm ketchup wafted through the lunchroom, signaling a meal that felt like home even on the busiest school day. Children enjoyed the contrast of the tender interior with the sticky, flavorful glaze, often sneaking bites before sitting down. It was hearty enough to power through long afternoons of lessons and playground games, a dependable dish that never disappointed. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze remains a beloved memory, proof that even the simplest recipes can create lasting comfort when shared with a room full of hungry students eager for something warm and familiar. Ham and scalloped potatoes delivered a creamy, savory combination that tasted like a holiday dinner served at midday. Thinly sliced potatoes were layered with diced ham and onions, then covered in a rich milk sauce before baking until bubbly and golden on top. The scent of smoky ham and buttery potatoes spread through the school corridors, drawing students forward with eager anticipation. Each forkful blended tender potatoes and salty ham with just enough sauce to coat every bite. Lunch ladies served generous squares that stayed warm and satisfying, a perfect answer to chilly days. Children savored the way the flavors melded, making it one of the most requested meals on the monthly menu. Ham and scalloped potatoes showed how school kitchens turned simple ingredients into comfort food that could rival any family recipe, leaving a memory of creamy richness that endures in the minds of those who tasted it. Creamed spinach over rice was the cafeteria's answer to the call for healthier lunches, pairing leafy greens with a mild, creamy sauce poured over fluffy rice. Fresh or frozen spinach was simmered with milk and a touch of butter until velvety, then ladled onto warm rice that absorbed the flavorful mixture. The vibrant green against the white rice made a cheerful sight on plastic trays. Teachers praised it as a powerhouse of vitamins, while children learned to enjoy spinach in a gentle, comforting form. The aroma of warm cream and earthy greens filled the air, and the first bite delivered a subtle sweetness that surprised many students. It was a dish that balanced nourishment with simplicity, offering a welcome break from heavier meals without ever feeling bland. Creamed spinach over rice proved that healthy food could still taste indulgent when treated with care, and remains a quiet favorite in the memories of those who experienced it. Mock pizza squares brought the excitement of pizza day even when budgets were tight, using thick bread dough, a smear of tomato sauce, and a generous layer of government cheese. Baked until the cheese bubbled and browned, these squares were cut into neat rectangles that fit perfectly on cafeteria trays. The scent of oregano and melting cheese drifted through the building, sparking cheers from students who knew a treat was coming. Each bite offered the chewy crust, sweet sauce, and gooey cheese that satisfied cravings without needing a pizzeria. Children often compared their slices, searching for the piece with the most browned edges or extra sauce. Lunch staff appreciated how easily the big pans could feed hundreds while still creating excitement. Mock pizza squares captured the joy of a special lunch, proving that even the simplest version of pizza could brighten a school day and leave a lasting impression of warm cheese and happy chatter. Baked custard cups ended many school lunches on a sweet, silky note, a dessert that felt both wholesome and indulgent. Eggs, milk, and sugar were whisked together and poured into small metal cups, then baked gently until set with a delicate golden top. Served chilled or at room temperature, the custard was smooth and lightly sweet, a perfect contrast to savory main dishes. Students relished the creamy texture, savoring each spoonful as the final reward of the meal. The faint scent of vanilla lingered in the air, promising comfort before the return to afternoon lessons. Teachers approved because it provided protein and calcium, while children simply enjoyed a dessert that felt like something from a family kitchen. Baked custard cups remain a symbol of simple pleasures, a reminder of how even modest ingredients can create a treat worth remembering. They brought a touch of elegance to the 1960s cafeteria, closing the meal with quiet satisfaction that still lingers in memory today. Waldorf apple salad brought a crisp sweetness to the lunch line, combining diced apples, chopped celery, and chewy raisins in a light mayonnaise dressing that glistened under the cafeteria lights. Each bite offered a refreshing crunch and a gentle mix of fruity and savory flavors, a welcome contrast to heavier main dishes. The bright green of the celery and the deep purple of the raisins made the salad as pretty as it was tasty, while the creamy dressing tied everything together into a single satisfying scoop. Students often poked at the raisins first, saving them like little prizes hidden among the apples. Teachers praised it as a balanced choice that provided fruit and vegetables in one dish, and the cool texture made it perfect for warm days when the kitchen ovens heated the building. Waldorf apple salad might seem simple now, but in the 1960s cafeteria it felt delightfully sophisticated, a touch of elegance on a plastic tray that turned an ordinary school lunch into something just a bit more special. Hot turkey sandwich with gravy delivered pure comfort, a hearty open-faced meal served on thick slices of white bread. Tender roasted turkey was layered generously and then drenched in rich brown gravy until the bread soaked up every drop of savory flavor. The aroma of slow-simmered poultry and warm spices filled the air, giving students a taste of a Sunday family dinner right in the middle of the school week. Steam rose from each plate as the sandwiches were ladled and passed down the line, and the gravy's glossy sheen promised a stick-to-your-ribs satisfaction. Children cut through the soft bread with the side of their forks, letting the gravy pool across their trays, while teachers welcomed the quiet that followed as everyone enjoyed each comforting bite. It was filling enough to last through recess and the longest math lessons, a simple but memorable dish that remains vivid in the memories of those who lined up for seconds. Sweet potato puff turned a basic vegetable into a dessert-like treat that thrilled students who usually avoided anything labeled a vegetable. Whipped sweet potatoes were mixed with a hint of sugar and butter, then topped with a crunchy layer of crushed cornflakes that baked to a golden crisp. The contrast of smooth, sweet filling and the caramelized cereal crust created a bite that was both creamy and crisp. As the pans came out of the oven, the warm scent of roasted sweet potato and toasted cornflakes drifted through the cafeteria, teasing appetites. Children often compared the dish to pie without the crust, and many went back for seconds despite claiming they were full. Teachers appreciated that it was packed with vitamins, while students simply loved its candy-like flavor. Sweet potato puff was a clever way to sneak nutrients into a beloved side dish, proving that school lunches could be both nourishing and delightfully indulgent. Creamed chipped ham sandwiches were a Pittsburgh favorite that made their way onto 1960s school menus, bringing savory comfort to cold afternoons. Finely minced ham was simmered in a creamy white sauce until thick and velvety, then spooned over soft hamburger buns that soaked up the rich gravy. The scent of smoky ham and warm milk sauce filled the cafeteria, promising a stick-to-your-ribs meal that could power students through the rest of the day. The mixture's salty-sweet balance made each bite a warm reminder of home cooking, and even those who were unsure at first found themselves scraping every last drop from the tray. Lunch ladies appreciated how easily the recipe could be stretched to feed hundreds while still tasting like a special treat. Creamed chipped ham sandwiches proved that simple ingredients, handled with care, could create a dish that was both practical and memorable, a lunchtime highlight that lingered in the minds of all who tasted it. Egg salad on rye brought a protein-packed punch to the lunchroom, combining chopped hard-boiled eggs with mayonnaise and a hint of mustard before piling the creamy mixture onto hearty rye bread. The earthy scent of rye mingled with the richness of the eggs, creating a sandwich that felt substantial and grown up. Children who usually turned away from plain boiled eggs found new appreciation in the velvety filling, its tangy flavor balanced by the bread's subtle spice. The bright yellow of the yolks peeked out from the edges, making each slice look inviting even before the first bite. It paired perfectly with a small carton of milk and a crisp apple, offering both nourishment and flavor without a heavy sauce. Teachers praised it as a model of balanced nutrition, while students enjoyed the way it held together neatly for quick bites between conversations. Egg salad on rye remains a memory of wholesome simplicity, a sandwich that satisfied hunger and offered quiet comfort during a busy school day. Vegetable beef soup with crackers was the ultimate winter warmer, simmered slowly until every ingredient reached perfect tenderness. Chunks of beef mingled with carrots, potatoes, celery, and peas in a rich broth that filled the entire building with a savory aroma. Students arriving from chilly playgrounds found instant comfort in the steam rising from their bowls. The saltines served alongside were ideal for crumbling into the soup or munching separately, adding a welcome crunch. Each spoonful delivered a balance of hearty meat and vegetables, making it both filling and nourishing. Teachers favored it for its balanced nutrition and ability to quiet a noisy cafeteria, as everyone savored the hot meal. For many children, this soup became a benchmark of homemade flavor, despite being prepared in massive school kitchen kettles. Vegetable beef soup with crackers demonstrated how simple ingredients, cooked patiently, could create a meal that felt like home and turned an ordinary school lunch into something far more satisfying. Prune whipped dessert brought a surprising touch of elegance to the lunch tray, a light meringue folded with pureed prunes for natural sweetness. The airy texture contrasted beautifully with the deep caramel-like flavor of the fruit, creating a treat that felt both sophisticated and comforting. Students were often skeptical at first, but one bite revealed a gentle sweetness and cloud-like softness that won over many hesitant eaters. The dessert's subtle sheen caught the light, making it look as special as it tasted. Teachers liked that it provided fiber and vitamins, while children enjoyed its pudding-like creaminess. Served chilled in small cups, Prune Whip was refreshing after a hot meal and left a pleasant, lingering sweetness. It was an example of how school cafeterias could surprise students with something new and unexpectedly delightful, proving that even prunes could become a favorite when transformed with care. The memory of that soft, airy dessert continues to charm anyone lucky enough to have tasted it. Apple Brown Betty was a thrifty yet deeply comforting dessert, layering sliced apples with buttery breadcrumbs and warm cinnamon before baking until golden and bubbling. The scent of spiced fruit filled the cafeteria as pans emerged from the ovens, instantly making mouths water. Each serving combined tender apples with a crisp, buttery topping that felt both rustic and indulgent. Children loved breaking through the crunchy layer to reach the sweet, soft fruit beneath. A small moment of delight in the middle of the school day. It paired perfectly with a small scoop of vanilla ice cream when the budget allowed, but was just as satisfying on its own. Teachers admired its simplicity and use of affordable ingredients, a nod to both economy and flavor. Apple Brown Betty turned ordinary apples into a dessert that felt like a holiday treat, ensuring its place in the warm memories of countless students who once lined up with eager trays. Peach Half with cottage cheese offered a curious combination that perfectly captured the 1960s belief in balanced nutrition. A single canned peach half was carefully placed in a small bowl and topped with a scoop of creamy cottage cheese, creating a sweet and savory pairing that looked like a little sun on the tray. The soft fruit and mild curds worked surprisingly well together, each bite blending gentle sweetness with smooth dairy richness. Some students loved it immediately, while others cautiously poked at the unusual duo before finally giving in to curiosity. Teachers approved of the protein and vitamins, making it a regular feature despite mixed reactions. Served ice cold, it was refreshing on warm days and offered a bright pop of color amid heavier dishes. Peach Half with cottage cheese remains one of the most distinctive cafeteria memories, a simple yet striking combination that spoke to an era unafraid of creative pairings. Milk carton surprise flavors gave students a reason to rush the lunch line, as seasonal choices like chocolate, strawberry, or even orange milk appeared without warning. The familiar waxed paper cartons held an element of mystery that turned a routine drink into an exciting moment. Children eagerly checked the crates, hoping to snag a favorite flavor before supplies ran out. The sweet scent of strawberry or the unexpected citrus of orange transformed the standard midday beverage into a treat worth talking about all afternoon. Teachers enjoyed the calm that followed as students happily sipped their chilled drinks. The cool, creamy texture offered comfort, whether paired with sandwiches or hot meals, making every surprise flavor a small celebration. These occasional twists turned milk into a conversation starter and gave each lunch a hint of fun. Milk carton surprise flavors remain a beloved memory of 1960s cafeterias, proof that even the simplest change can brighten a school day. Cottage cheese and canned peach plates were the no-cook lunch that showed up every time the stove was off limits or the heat outside was too much to bear. You scooped a mound of cottage cheese onto your plate, opened a can of peach halves, arranged them neatly, and called it lunch. Maybe you added a lettuce leaf underneath to make it look fancy, but nobody was fooling themselves. It was all about speed and simplicity. Diet cookbooks from the 1970s praised this plate as a light, protein-packed option that took barely 5 minutes to make. It was weirdly filling, cold, and refreshing, especially when summer kitchens felt like ovens. You could spot this combo everywhere, from lunch counters to school cafeterias, with old diner menus proudly listing it as the fruit and cottage cheese plate. On the other hand, stuffed bell peppers were an American classic, especially in places like the South. The idea was really similar to the egg-stuffed salad tomatoes I was talking about. Even then, I told you how it's more or less like these bell peppers. The idea here this time was to hollow these peppers out and fill them in with things like rice, tomato sauce, and ground meat. They were also the perfect thing to take to work, because you could carry them in just about anything. The more transportable something was, the better it would function as a work lunch. Stuffed bell peppers also had the extra effect of giving you a boost of energy, which was always really nice because desk jobs, as I'm sure all of you might be familiar with, can suck the soul out of you. The reason these were popular in the South is because it's arguably the home of stuffed peppers and all variants of them. Those people love their spice, man. Stuffed hot dog boats were something that were really popular among working-class families. This is because a lot of these meals so far are really practical and good for sustainable, everyday use, but they're a little lacking in the fun factor. Stuffed hot dog boats made up for this, though. They were kid-friendly, and they became something of a novelty meal with how much children ended up taking to them. They were also really popular in church cookbooks as a budget-friendly and creative dish. The idea behind a stuffed hot dog boat was that you would slice the dog right down the middle and then fill it with different kinds of toppings, kind of like a boat. These toppings would typically be baked beans, mashed potatoes, chili and cheese, or bacon bits. Anything on hand would work really, and people would experiment and play around with different kinds of fillings. Either way, it was a dish that was just fun to make, especially with your kids. It was also the kind of thing that was genuinely filling because of the way it was built. You could end up consuming more than your daily protein needs just off of one or two of these. Now, speaking of retro, tuna jelly salad was a really vintage recipe that started coming into the spotlight around the 60s. This was the time when Jell-O and gelatin mold-based dishes were getting really popular. The idea was to use the gelatin mold to encase the tuna with a typical salad dressing, and it really worked back then. I'm not exactly sure how people would react to it now, since I think the idea of a tuna and gelatin crossover is a bit too bold for a lot of people's palates. I could always be wrong though, so you tell me, dear viewer. Would you take a tuna jelly salad to work? Or would you just make a quick run for the nearest Wendy's? I wouldn't blame you at all if you picked the second one. The idea behind salads like these was to throw a spin on an otherwise really boring format of cooking. Salads were okay, but they were never something Americans preferred with their whole hearts. Nowadays, that opinion really started to become public sentiment. Plus, as I was previously talking about, most people would opt for Starbucks now. And I'll tell you this right now, tuna, Jell-O, and caffeine do not go together. So we're not done with the toasts just yet. Pork and beans on buttered toast was arguably the lifeblood of 1960s frugal eating. It was a simple and cheap meal that was very popular even from the 1940s, and while baked beans on toast was something that people always associated with New England and immigrant cuisine, baked beans on toast actually became something that Americans took very fondly to. It was thanks to the act of mixing canned pork and beans in there, and these beans would already be seasoned and sweetened. Thank you, Campbell's. This dish was something you would see in mining communities really often. You would also see them in mill towns. You didn't need any sort of prep work for this dish whatsoever. All you had to do was just pop open the can and heat it up. You could make a sandwich out of it too, or you could have it as a side to some stew and dip it in. People ate very different and interesting things back then, not just to keep everything according to budget, but also so that things would just taste better, be healthier, you know? People really used to treat their food like fuel back in the day. The next thing we have on the list is salmon croquettes with creamed spinach. Now on paper, this sounds like just what you would need, right? It's salmon, so there's protein. It's creamed spinach, so you definitely have a side that's jam-packed with nutrition. I mean, it seems ideal. The kind of thing you'd always want to be eating at work. For a long time in the 80s, that was how it worked too. People, particularly those working office and desk jobs, were very fond of this kind of lunch. It was also the perfect change in flavors from what people were originally used to. However, this was probably even more reliant on advanced preparation than egg salad stuffed tomatoes. That just wouldn't work with the way so many people were re-entering the workforce in the second half of the 20th century. It basically meant that your wife would have to stay at home and do kitchen duties every day, and most wives were opting to go to work instead. Labor-intensive meals like this, as a result, just didn't last in the long haul. Pineapple and cheese salad cups were the weird little lunch that somehow ended up in almost every community cookbook back in the day. You grabbed a can of pineapple rings, scooped cottage cheese right in the center, sprinkled on shredded cheddar, and if you were really fancy, served the whole thing on a lettuce leaf. It looked impressive in those black and white church bulletins, but really, this was all about making canned food stretch into something that passed for lunch. Canned pineapple was cheap, cottage cheese was always chilling in the fridge, and cheddar somehow found its way into everything. It sounds wild now, but people loved the mix. Sweet, salty, creamy, and a little crunchy if you added walnuts or celery. Moms tossed these together for luncheons, potlucks, or the days when cooking felt like too much work. It was fast, weirdly filling, and cost next to nothing. You could find this recipe clipped to refrigerator doors or tucked into those old spiral-bound cookbooks every kitchen drawer seemed to have. Cucumber and onion sandwiches were a really simple and refreshing butter, mayonnaise, different kinds of spices, and sometimes bits of bacon and ham on top of cucumbers. See, now I don't know if you guys will agree with me, but cucumbers really have a good place in the world of sandwiches and burgers. They're one of the most light toppings you can add, they're abundant, they're good for you, that crunchy bite is immaculate, and they work well with most kinds of sauces. It's a really straightforward dish that can work with almost anything you happen to have on hand. And on a hot summer day, this was the perfect meal to eat for your work lunch. It was served as an interlude between the usual fried, oily, and greasy food most Americans were used to anyway. Onions were something that everyone always had, and this could work with fresh or stale bread. They were beloved mostly for their detoxifying effects and how refreshing a cucumber can be. Textile workers and coal miners in particular loved these because it would take the edge off. So, bar none, the best breakfast to start your day with was always creamed chipped beef on toast. It wasn't really the most visually impressive or appealing dish, but it had a certain kind of coziness to it. Maybe it's the kind of vibe you cultivate after being a household breakfast item for years. Maybe they just liked the simplicity. All you had to do was get some toast, a can of chipped beef, and you were pretty much done. Maybe they wanted to be like their brave army because this was also one of the most widespread military breakfasts. It could be the texture, or it could be that it's an easy source of protein early in the morning. But given how all of these are likely, that really tells you just how popular of a breakfast this ended up becoming. Not only that, It was one of the most economical ways to get some beef in your diet. That was just a cut of meat that was too hard to afford regularly for most working-class families. Fish finger sandwiches started off as being wonderful party food and a pretty reasonable meal to go for at diners, but they ended up being something that was also a dish people wanted more of in their daily routines. Some tartar sauce, a fried fish, and 2 slices of bread have never done anyone wrong. It's something you can rely on, and it's a perfect intersection between convenient, unfamiliar, and healthy. Lots of people that were trying to take care of their diet, cut out a bit of their usual sources of protein, and just eat a bit more organic would opt for sandwiches like this. I think if you ever really want to make something pop off in America, you just put it in a sandwich, because that at least guarantees that everyone will try it, you know? Fish finger sandwiches are sometimes a recipe that people say we got from European culture, but it's something I think fishermen have been living off of forever. So not only is this a dish you would see in a tech labyrinth, otherwise known as offices, you would also just see fishermen and dock workers eating these after a hard day's work. It would put some pep in your step, and that's never really something people can have too much of. I think that now sandwiches have become more advanced since accessibility has only gone up with the amount of frozen foods we have now, so these probably have taken a bit of a back seat. If you are considering giving up Starbucks as a hardship, just try making your coffee out of these plants. Dandelion coffee came into existence during the Dust Bowl when people could not afford coffee beans and other products. That's right. Those yellow flowers that appear on your lawn in spring and are so annoying once provided the means to satisfy caffeine cravings at the survival level. For it, people would uproot dandelions, bake the roots until they were black and toasty, and then pulverize them into a brew. There was no sugar or cream, just the natural taste of roasted roots. It was not as strong as real coffee, but it provided people with something warm to drink in the mornings when they were unsure about the future. Moreover, dandelions were free and easily available, no need to go to Starbucks. To the chagrin of dandelion coffee, it is now considered a health drink. Rich in antioxidants, it is believed to have liver benefits and can be found at health food stores for a hefty price. It was not about the latest fad diet or the newest way to live a healthier lifestyle. It was about not going insane without your cup of coffee in the morning. I can't help but wonder how the farmers of Dust Bowl must have been feeling sipping on this dandelion brew and hoping for a better tomorrow and a decent cup of coffee. Now it is a retro chic beverage, while back then, dandelion coffee was a means of getting back to the normal, even if the normal tasted like the grass one mows. So you might notice that this issue where you need a lot of prep work for these dishes isn't exactly a unique one. Lots of dishes share it, and even cottage cheese and pineapple bowls have the same problem. Now, this dish was something that came out around the 60s and 70s, when Americans were really into trying out new things. One of the first things they opted for was pineapple, and this was thanks to Spam, which really made the American population warm up to an otherwise chronically detested fruit. This bowl was seen as healthy, full of protein, it was cold, and it could be prepared way ahead of time. The reason this lasted as long as it did was probably because of that, though only people that were super serious about their health and diet would be bringing this kind of stuff to the office. It wouldn't make sense to ignore the perfectly convenient, cheap, and delicious deli food on the corner of your office and go for a cottage cheese and pineapple bowl. Unfortunately, while this one has the convenience factor down, it couldn't last in the long haul because tastes have just changed too much from the days where bowls like this could work. Egg salad and olive sandwiches were also one of the best combinations people had when times were tough. Around the end of the month, when your pay would be finishing up and you were stretching the last of your groceries, it was very common for people to make this for breakfast. It was really easy to elevate a simple sandwich into something more delicious thanks to this combination, and it got very popular in church fundraiser cookbooks. You would also see this on school cafeteria menus, and it was a really popular choice for picnics and potlucks too. For a humble sandwich that's just egg salad and olives, it definitely got around. This sandwich worked amazingly well as a packable lunch you could take with you or as a quick little family meal. Eggs were still not too expensive for most people, so working-class families relied on them as much as they could. 1 or 2 eggs was enough for the dish if you were being modest. And if you had some sauces to throw on top, then that would be even better. Cabbage and bacon fry up was something people adored for its simplicity and its affordability. It was a hearty meal you would frequently see on dinner tables throughout the 1960s if you weren't already tired of seeing it everywhere in cookbooks. It was very common to see this in Appalachia and the South, because cabbage was especially cheap there. Bacon was something the entire nation had a deep-found appreciation for, but the South was always one step ahead in all things savory. The dish was supposed to be a main course meal with a side. This would usually be cornbread or potatoes, but if you were working with lower quantities, then this dish could also do great as a side dish. Cabbage was one of the most affordable vegetables on the entire market, and it was not seasonal. Back then, refrigeration had not become a countrywide phenomena that everyone could rely on 24/7 like we do. We have our fridges on all the time, you know? And cabbage was one of those kinds of vegetables that could last for weeks and weeks without any kind of refrigeration. It was really quick and easy, it was flexible, and you could even try all kinds of different spices and toppings like ranch dressing to make it even better. Cheese dreams were the open-faced, melty sandwiches that turned plain old white bread into lunch in under 10 minutes. You laid out a slice of bread, topped it with American cheese, and stuck it under the broiler until bubbly and browned. If you had extras lying around, you could throw on a tomato slice or a strip of bacon, but most folks kept it simple. Cheese dreams popped up in every old-school cookbook as a lifesaver for hungry kids, rushed workdays or weekends when grocery shopping had not happened yet. It was one of those lunches that made the most of cheap pantry basics, but still felt warm and filling. The cheese bubbled up golden and gooey, the edges of the bread crisped up just enough, and lunch was done before you even had time to set the table. Families loved it because it tasted good, cost next to nothing, and required zero effort. It was one of those old-fashioned meals that looked like a shortcut but stuck around because it simply worked when time and money were both tight. Creamed peas on toast were a very simple and inexpensive meal that helped many people get through the day in the 1960s, especially throughout rural America. Peas were man's best friend because of how abundant they were. You could also throw them on top of anything for a better crunch and flavor, or you could just make breakfast meals out of them like this. The 1960s were seen as a transitional period for the culinary world in America. Processed convenience foods were slowly starting to dominate, but working-class homes were going to feel the change later than others. They were still relying on home-cooked meals that had been passed down from family to family. That's pretty much how it would work in a lot of rural areas. People would find out a great idea, record it, pass it down to their kids. Sometimes that would be ways to farm or maintain the home, and other times it would be how to have a breakfast that saves you money. A can of peas cost just a few cents, and it did the job better than anything else if you didn't have beans on hand, so why not? I mean, it's a lot better than just toast. To be honest, same deal with corned beef and cabbage wraps. The thing with sandwiches is that, as good as they were, most people really were trying to get onto that health parade that was taking over. It wasn't just a trend or a niche movement you'd only find in states that voted blue. It was something even the anti-vaxxers were getting behind, and if you can get those people to think about their health, you know we're either at rock bottom or approaching it. Corned beef and cabbage wraps were supposed to be familiar ground, while also being healthy enough that you could eat them every day. Plus, lots of people had grown pretty accustomed to eating cabbage thanks to victory gardens, which were just makeshift gardens you would have in your backyard during the Depression and grow crops out of. These were actually really good too, and with canned corned beef becoming a widespread item in most stores, it was only easier to make at home. Even someone who couldn't cook could just make and assemble this on their own. People that grew up during World War II will know that mixing sawdust with bread to fortify it so that your supply would last twice as long is not quite the urban myth it is made out to be today, but rather a sad fact of a dark time that people would prefer to leave in the past. This was something born purely out of necessity and a lack of basic necessities like flour. Since it was becoming so scarce across America, People's supplies of bread were running out fast and often. Bread was the only thing families had to eat too. With even that comfort gone, people took to mixing sawdust, which you could even taste in the bread. In some cases, it made the bread go bad faster, such as people when used too much of it. But in most other appliances of this technique, it worked as a filler when nothing else could be used as one. This would also set up a trend of consuming fiber in the 70s, even though most companies used cellulose fiber that was made from sawdust. So it actually does have quite a history in America. If we take a small intermission from the dessert side of things and step on over to some hearty, comforting, and homely soups, we'll find a golden recipe lost among the cookbooks of the 20th century that don't get to see the light of day anymore. Pea and ham soup got its name because of how affordable it was. This is probably the cheapest thing on the list to make. Actually, it literally costs just a few cents. All you needed was ham and peas. You'd simmer them in the crock pot with diced ham and some vegetables like potatoes and celery, then slow cook it until the soup got thickened. You'd get this incredibly creamy, lovely soup that was just perfect for winter nights or after a long, exhausting weekend. Maybe you want to ease up on your stomach and eat something healthy for a change, but you still want some familiar flavors to keep you company. A soup like this would be right up your alley. It costs nothing, feels better than most things, and you can make it any time. You could probably even take a nap and wake up to the scent of the soup slowly cooking, becoming the final product. Also, Cornish pasty was a portable meal that was an essential food for one specific group of people: miners. In Michigan, Pennsylvania, Montana, and other popular mining regions in the United States, this was the meal to have every day. It came from Cornwall, England, and it was this handheld meat and potato pie that became so beloved by coal, copper, and iron ore miners. These miners would always be working in dirty, dark, damp, and dangerous caverns, and they had no way to really ever wash their hands in the middle of work. It's not like people were going to be investing in or carrying bottles of sanitizer. The pasties, though, weren't going to be a problem in this regard. You could hold them up by the crust and just eat the filling. Of course, this meant that miners would have to throw away the crust, but you were still eating the majority of the meal. This was also durable, and it could stay warm for hours and hours, which made it ideal for miners. Despite what you might think, some of those mines really get low temperature-wise. It was also something that Cornish miners brought into the country when they eventually immigrated. They had settled in American mining towns in the 1800s, and these pasties have been a tradition in America as well ever since. It might not sound like much today, but back then, this quick plate was a lifesaver when groceries were tight and cooking felt like a chore. Peanut butter and lettuce sandwiches were the strange little lunch you would not believe unless you grew up eating them. You grabbed a couple slices of soft sandwich bread, spread peanut butter on both sides, and tucked in crisp iceberg lettuce, because that is what most families had in the fridge. It sounds like a bad joke now, but it was crunchy, creamy, and surprisingly filling. That is why so many old cookbooks recommended it for kids' lunchboxes and quick snacks. Some adventurous folks added raisins or sliced bananas, but most stuck with plain lettuce and peanut butter when time was short and the pantry looked empty. It was quick, weird, and stretched every last bit of food when grocery runs were few and far between. You did not have to love it, but chances are if you were around back then, you definitely remember it. Cold macaroni ring mold with tuna was the kind of no-cook lunch you either loved or never wanted to see again, but back in the day, it was everywhere. You cooked elbow macaroni ahead of time, chilled it, then mixed in canned tuna, mayo, and peas, pouring the whole thing into a gelatin mold. After a quick trip to the fridge, it came out shaped like a perfect ring, ready for slicing. It sounds a little strange, but in church luncheons, potlucks, and quick summer meals, this was considered fancy and practical. Moms loved it because there was no cooking when the house was already boiling hot, and the ingredients were cheap pantry staples. The gelatin molds made it look like more effort went into lunch than actually did. You sliced off a wedge, maybe threw a little lettuce or parsley on the plate, and that was it. Lunch was ready, cold, filling, and good enough to impress the neighbors. It might not win over modern taste buds, but back then, This molded tuna salad was the fast-track ticket to a retro lunch that felt special when time was short. Speaking of meaty sandwiches, the Turkey Club sandwich was another fan favorite. Now, this one was known for its 3 layers of bread, which made it stand out from the rest of the sandwiches on the table. The club sandwich has its roots in American culinary history, with some sources suggesting it was first served in private social clubs in the late 19th century. By the time Grandma was making them, it had already become the talk of the town. Gram often made this one the day after Thanksgiving when there was no shortage of leftover roast turkey in the refrigerator. The key ingredient in this sandwich was crispy bacon, which Gram added to make it kid-friendly and 10 times more delicious. Grandma's Turkey Club sandwich was often cut in quarters or halves, which made it easier to eat, and this was the first time sandwiches were cut diagonally. And remember the toothpicks Gram used to hold it together with colorful cellophane frills? Brings back memories, doesn't it? Around the later half of the 20th century, there was this big public paranoia that had spread concerning health and the after effects of the way Americans had been eating. Thanks to all that rage, we got dishes like vegetable aspic cups. See, lots of Americans were coming home to an angry mom, a worried wife, or a dad who just kept saying he wouldn't pay for the doctor's fees when your eating habits would eventually circle back around to bite you. It kind of did set fear into people's hearts, especially since the arguments were so convincing. Who could deny that they were eating Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's like addicts back then, or even now? That's why there was this newfound room for fusion food or experimental recipes like vegetable aspic cups. Before, you could tell somebody about vegetables that were set in these tomato-flavored gelatins, and they'd just laugh at you. A chilled salad on top of that? But thanks to how easy convenience food culture had made things, with how you could just buy gelatin and frozen veggies whenever you needed, this was actually a really solid and healthy work lunch option. Taste the innovation in every hearty bite of Jiffy ground beef cornbread casserole, a triumph of American home cooking. Rising to popularity in the mid-20th century, this casserole marries seasoned ground beef with the simplicity of Jiffy cornbread mix, a product that became a staple in American kitchens following its introduction in the 1930s by the Chelsea Milling Company. The preparation involves browning ground beef with onions, garlic, and a medley of spices, then layering it in a baking dish, topping it with a batter made from the iconic cornbread mix. Once baked, the casserole presents a delightful contrast of flavors and textures, with golden cornbread capping a juicy, flavorful beef base. It became a favored choice for an easy and satisfying meal, perfectly blending ease of preparation with hearty flavors. So, like I was just telling you, Spam used to be the next big thing, and for good reason too. We had things like Spam and cheese roll-ups. A typical 70s office lunch would look like slices of Spam that had been rolled up with mustard and cheese. Now, these could either be grilled to enhance the smokiness of the Spam and make it contrast nicer with the pineapple, or you could bake it so that the cheese would melt and the mustard would mix in with it better for an overall more well-rounded flavor. All things considered, this was on the right track. It was quick, it was tasty, it was healthy, and it was also what people needed during a time where re-entering the workforce was really hard and put a lot of people out of their usual routines. The thing is, America is known for fickle trends. We'll like something one day, swear by it the next, and forget it halfway into the night. Spam and cheese roll-ups were good, but they took a sideline and started being party food more than a work lunch. It never made the cover of fancy food magazines, but it kept showing up where it mattered, on busy lunch tables when time was short. Spam and pickle sandwiches were one of those salty, tangy lunches you could whip together before the coffee even finished brewing. You sliced up Spam, fried it in a pan, stacked it on soft white bread, and layered pickles over the top, done in under 10 minutes. It was not the prettiest meal, but it was fast, filling, and made with stuff most families already had sitting in the pantry. Spam was practically a food group during the lean years, and those jars of pickles stretched on forever, making this one of the quickest cheap lunches around. Some folks added mustard, lettuce, or even a slice of cheese if they had it, but most just kept it plain. Back then, nobody cared about gourmet ingredients or trendy recipes. Lunch was about survival, and a hot Spam sandwich hit the spot when the cupboards were running bare. Macaroni and tomato soup bakes were an easy-to-handle casserole that was extremely hot in the working-class communities throughout the middle half of the 20th century. This was a dish that took elbow macaroni with canned tomato soup, and it was almost always Campbell's. A few more pantry staple ingredients would ensure an inexpensive and wonderful meal that maybe the kids would take a few rounds getting used to. For the adults, though, it was the best way to have comfort food on a budget besides potatoes. All you needed was cheese, milk, and eggs if they were available, but even without these, the dish could still be made. It just would not be as thick, rich, or as flavorful. The best part about this was that all you had to actually do was just boil the pasta and you would be set for the entire day. This could include bits of ground beef, bacon, or ham, whatever kind of protein is your choice really. But it could also be made creamy and with just aromatics and herbs. There was a lot of versatility with this bake, and that's because it was so simple. It made for a very flexible dish that could fit a lot of people's preferences easily, with almost none of the fuss you normally associate with homemade pasta dishes. This is so easy, even your teenagers could pick it up, really. Share the school lunch you still dream about in the comments. Tap like if these memories made you hungry, and subscribe to keep the taste of the 1960s cafeteria alive.